Thank you for attending our Kicking It Old School Classroom series. I'm Bryna Davis at InternationalStudent.com, and today we're going to be comparing the difference between a private and a public school. Now, the very first thing that you're going to want to keep in mind when comparing these is where the funding is coming from for these two different kinds of institutions. And the reason that this is important is because it's going to have a direct impact on your out-of-pocket expense. So, first of all, at a public schools receive state funding. So what this means for you is that you'll have less out-of-pocket expense, meaning less tuition to pay. At a private school, they do not receive state funding. They pretty much rely on donors, which are typically alumni, and your tuition. So this might mean that you have a higher out-of-pocket expense to pay, but if you're really interested in a private school, before you write it off, go to the school's website or give them a call and see what kind of scholarships or grant packages they have to offer, because typically they're fairly good at providing those to students who are interested. Next, we have class size and degree options. So public schools are typically larger, so they're going to have larger class sizes. Now what this means is you're not going to have a one-on-one relationship with a professor more often than not, and typically you're not going to be able to know the first name of each of your fellow students in your class. But on the flip side, this means that you'll have more degree options, so you'll really be able to find that degree that you're after and pursue it. Private schools, on the other hand, they typically have smaller class sizes, so if you do want that one-on-one relationship with professors, then private schools are a great option. However, they typically do have less degree options for students to choose from. Now, third, we have the social aspects. And the reason that this is so important is because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, you're studying abroad, and it should focus just as much on the social aspect as the academic aspect. So, looking at public schools, it's going to be a larger campus, as we discussed, so it might feel more like a town. If you do not want this kind of environment, then you might not want to attend a public school. However, they typically have more activities that they offer. So they'll have intramural sports, they'll have all kinds of hobbies and clubs that you can pursue. So if you have a more obscure activity that you're interested in, perhaps like fencing or bowling, then a public school might be a good option for you. However, a private school, typically they're going to have less activities available to students, but they do offer a more tight-knit feel. So if you want to be able to walk around campus and recognize everyone, or maybe even know most of the individuals by first name, then a private school is going to be a good option for you. Last, we have religious affiliation. Now, if you want to attend a school that has a religious affiliation, then a private school is going to be a good option for you. Just keep in mind that just because it does have a religious affiliation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be embedded in the culture. So what that means is you might not actively see people practicing that religion. However, the school might sometimes require students to take a few religion classes. So those are a few different options that you will want to keep in mind when considering private versus public school, and it will help you narrow down what school is going to be the best option for you. Now, if you want to see what schools are in the U.S. for you to choose from, both private and public, you can go to InternationalStudent.com. There you can go to our school search and find all the schools in the U.S. and find the best school for you. Class dismissed.
Well, we hear so much about the benefits of private schools compared to public schools, but is the extra money really worth it? Well, today we're going to be exploring that topic, looking at the costs and the benefits of some of the hottest private schools around in the D.C. area. And here to discuss this important topic is Ann Dolan. She's the president of Educational Connections here with us today. Hi, Ann. Good to see you again.
Great to see you.
So, you know, we're very fortunate here in the D.C. area. We have not only wonderful private schools, but we've got fantastic public schools too. We've got the best of both worlds.
We really do. And that's why it's such a hard decision for parents. You know, sometimes when they have a great school in their neighborhood, there are definitely pros and cons. Would the private school be better for their child, or should they stay with their home-based school?
And even if you are so lucky to be able to go to a magnet school that's out of your neighborhood, that still comes under the public school category.
Yes.
So you're not shelling out more for that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Magnet schools, charter schools, those are all taking public funds.
Right. All right, well, let's talk about some of the pros of private education. Why would a parent choose to send their child to a private school?
Well, I think parents send their kids to private schools for a number of different reasons, and actually now they're called independent schools. That's more the term, which is interesting. But I'd say that, you know, now parents are thinking, well, what can my local public school offer? And what is the difference with a private school? For example, you know, maybe their child needs more academic rigor that their neighborhood school can't provide. They want their child to be pushed. They want their child to excel. Other parents may look at their student and say, you know what? He needs a lot more structure. He's having a hard time paying attention and to achieving potential. I may want a school specifically designed for kids with ADHD.
And then you could find one probably more easily in the private sector, right?
Yes,
yeah.
That's for sure. You know, the private sector really appeals to every child. You know, you have schools like the Sienna School in Silver Spring for kids with dyslexia that are very bright but have a glitch with reading. You have other schools that are sending kids to Ivy League colleges. And so their advanced curriculum is really appealing to parents as well.
For those headed to college, I'm sure parents are looking at things like you know, what kinds of what's the graduation rate? What kind of SAT scores does this school produce?
Right.
You know, if my child goes here, will I be able to get into this college of my choice, which may be a top-tier school or an Ivy League school?
Right.
And is it equally? Can your child get in on an equal basis if they go to public or private school?
That's the million-dollar question. Parents ask that all the time, and I'd say it honestly depends on the private school that your child is attending. You know, many of these schools are so well known for really preparing kids for college that when admissions officers see a child from their public school and a child from this school with similar GPAs, they're probably going to go with the child from the private school if they have very similar records.
Why is that?
Well, I think that they know the curriculum. They look at the class load the child is taking. They can see what types of classes they've taken. Are they challenging classes like college level classes such as AP or IB? And they also know that they have a track record with this school, that they are consistently producing top graduates that have been successful at their college.
Does it have anything to do with the financial situation of a family? I mean, do the colleges think, well, if this family can afford to send their child to undergraduate private school, they're going to have no problems with the tuition at this very exclusive college?
Good question. You know, it's interesting these days because I think years ago, private schools used to be somewhat elitist, but that is not the case anymore. In fact, 30% of kids at these independent schools are there on financial aid. It's very different these days. These schools want diversity. They want their school to look like a slice of America. So it's not the case where they see, oh, if the child can afford this private school, then they can afford my college, because they don't know if the child is there on financial aid.
That's good to know, especially with the high costs of both of those education levels. You know, some of the other reasons parents may choose private, I would think, would be they're looking at maybe class size.
They are.
Maybe like the student-teacher ratio. Are they going to get more individual attention in a private school?
I would definitely say yes, that's for sure, and that's one of the big bonuses of a private school. You know, in many of the counties in our area, you're looking at class sizes, even at the elementary level, of about 30 kids, and that's a lot for one teacher. But look at these private schools. I mean, they're boasting like a 12-to-1 ratio. One teacher for every 12 kids, or at tops 18 students in a class. So that's a big difference when you really get to know your teacher, and you get a lot of individualized instruction.
You see it from both sides. What do you see as far as enrichment programs go? If you had a child, would you feel that they would have more opportunities for all kinds of extracurricular opportunities in a private school versus a public school?
Probably. You know, again, it certainly depends on the school, but I would say many of these private schools have pretty large endowments, some of them up to $100 million. So when you have that much money, you can afford to put money into technology. Maybe every child has a laptop, or you can have cutting-edge facilities. You can have state-of-the-art sports equipment and football fields. So it really does vary. But that is definitely a plus that many parents think about, is beyond academics. What are the offerings at that school?
And probably some really great class trips too.
Oh,
some
yes.
Awesome places, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing, is that in their junior year, many schools offer a study abroad program, and that's appealing to a lot of families.
Well, I'll say. As far as the athlete goes, I would think it would be easier to get on a varsity team at a private school because there are fewer students versus, you know, the throngs that are trying to get on the one football team or the one whatever team for women.
It's really true.
Yeah, at a public school. So, I mean, for somebody that's really into athletics, would it be better to go to the public school?
Well, I just worked with a family that decided to go to a parochial school, Paul VI, which is in Fairfax, Virginia, instead of their local high school, because they knew that their son would never make the basketball team, but that he could play basketball at this school. And so for many kids, when something else is important outside of academics, like the football team, the soccer team, basketball team, that's definitely something to consider. And many parents make that leap because of sports.
Wow, I can imagine they would. Gives the kids an opportunity to play where they may not have played. They may have sat on the bench if they had gone to the other school. All right, so if you are a parent and you're thinking maybe, what am I going to go private school for my child next year? What's the time frame? When should they start looking? I mean, is it very, it must be very competitive. I would think there are dates to adhere to.
There are, yes. You need to start about a year before and thinking about school. So in September, the applications are released. And then students will go on school visits, they'll arrange interviews, they'll get their application together. They'll take this test called the SSAT, which is like a junior version of the SAT. And at my company, we provide a lot of prep for those kids. They want to get top scores to bolster their chances. And then they have to submit everything in January. They hear back from the schools in March, and then they have to let the schools know by April whether they will attend or not. So right now, a lot of students are getting those letters. Did I make it? Did I not make the cut?
Time crunch is on.
Yes.
All right, Ann Dolan, thanks so much for joining us today. Lots of good information there about public schools and private schools. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Melanie.
All right, coming up next here on Let's Talk Live, step aside, Duggars. There is a new family in town, and we're going to tell you all about this new reality TV show. And if you have something to say, tweet us. Send it to Let's Talk Live DC.
This couple's son will be starting school next year. The wife has looked at local public schools, but she also wants to consider private schools. Her husband isn't so sure. He worries private schools are too elitist, and he'll be paying off tuition for the rest of his life. But his wife's been doing some research. Although some private school educations cost as much as a house, most don't. In fact, of the more than 33,000 private schools in the U.S., the majority offer financial assistance and even free tuition. The cost of private schools varies widely. The median cost of first grade at independent elementary schools is about $19,000. But most parochial schools are far less, with Catholic elementary schools costing about $3,000. Several cities and states offer vouchers or tax credits to fund private school tuition for eligible families. And the list of areas keeps growing. But there are other things to consider, too. Private schools tend to have smaller class sizes, which may help your child get more individual attention. They also have more freedom than public schools. They can have unique philosophies that might fit well with your family's views and values. Or not. But just because you're paying for a private education doesn't mean you'll get one that's right for your child. Unlike private schools, public schools must provide support for kids with learning disabilities. Some private schools lack cultural diversity. Nationwide, only 1 in 4 students in independent schools comes from a racial minority. Finally, private schools not only choose their curriculum, but also their students. This means an admissions process, which can be daunting. The best way to find the right school? Get informed. Talk to friends, research your options on great schools, and visit. You won't regret it.
So choosing classes for high school, it's a daunting task. I think you should consider it on a 4-year plan. In fact, we have built on this very website a place for you to list your 4-year plan. You can enter your classes and change them at any time and update it and sort of map out and strategize what you want to do with your high school years. In general, it's a good idea for you to challenge yourself on an increasing level. You want to start sort of low, like with 0 advanced classes or 1, possibly 2. Don't set it high freshman year and then go down. You want to take fewer advanced classes early on and then take a little bit more each year. That would look way better. Choosing classes, I think it's really important. You have 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of history, 4 years of science. Your state might only require you to have 2 years of a foreign language, but colleges like you to have 3. I recommend that you take 4. I think it is a good idea for you to take a senior year foreign language, and if you have a particular interest in a subject like science or math or English, you can also take your electives in that area, so you can double up on something that you really, really love. I wouldn't double up on things that you don't love because that's a recipe for disaster. Make sure that you've met all your state requirements for technical education, career education, or occupational education, whatever your school calls it. You also need your PE and your health, don't forget, and your art. And heads up, if you want to apply to the University of California, Berkeley, UCLA, UCSD, Irvine, etc., Santa Barbara, you will need a year of art in the same art. So that means you could take a year of choir, a year of band, those things work. You could take beginning photo and advanced photo, beginning ceramics and advanced ceramics, but you can't take beginning ceramics and beginning photo. It has to be in the same art. And I think that's all the wonderful advice I can think to give you about how to choose your classes for 4 years. Bye.
Mom, it's time to talk about touring St. Pudens, but Dad wants to give us 2 cents.
Oh, great.
Sorry, Susan, but St. Pudens is not the right school for him.
Mom, you always said Dad was an amazing teacher. He knows schools. Just listen. For me.
Fine.
A great high school challenges kids to dream big about their future. Before deciding on a school, you have to visit. And when you do, find out about these 3 things: academics and pathways to college, student culture, safety and environment. Ask how the AP and honors system works. It's as crucial as it is confusing.
I don't really know the difference between honors and AP.
Parents really need to understand how tracking works. Some courses prepare kids for college. Other courses don't. And some other courses are really good for kids trying to get into a competitive college. You need to make sure you understand how that school does tracking and how to get your child onto the track you want.
If kids don't get into advanced classes early on, they can't always get into them later, and this can hurt when applying to college. Also ask how many kids graduate and where they go after that.
At good high schools, every child has a plan for what they'll do after graduation. 4-year college, post-secondary technical training, military. They've got a plan, and the school is helping them get there.
Look at the school's culture. Will your kid find people who share his passions? Is it cool to be smart? Look for clues in the trophy case, the school newspaper, and the clubs.
There's an Italian club, environmental club,
Mountain biking club. There's a lot more, but I can't remember them right now.
Don't forget the physical environment, like the bathrooms. The school expectations is going to have low expectations of the custodians, too. Are there lots of security cameras or bullying posters? Find out why. Has the school figured something out, or is security an issue? Bottom line, we want a school that will challenge Zach to reach his dreams, whatever they are.
Okay, check out some other schools. Richard, if he ends up a felon, it's on you.
Dad, you're the best. I mean, second to Mom, of course.
In today's Mommy Minutes, I'll be telling you our pros and cons of private school. So we did public and homeschool and private school. The private school we chose is a faith-based Christian private school, and so that's going to have a little bit of a different list of pros and cons than a secular private school. For us, One of the things that we liked about the private school we chose is that even though we don't have as much freedom to choose curriculum like we did in homeschool, we are choosing a school whose leadership is choosing curriculum that lines up with our faith. It's not just the curriculum though, it's also just the leadership, the mentoring, the purpose of education. It all lines up with our faith. I like that in private school, the kids are in a classroom environment, they're having recess regularly, so they're having that community experience, and they're getting that independence from us. They are going out and experiencing part of the world and practicing and putting into practice the things that we've taught at home. And so they're learning independence, but they're also under the leadership of an organization that shares our beliefs and will reinforce those beliefs in the way that they deal with our kids and with other kids, like on the at recess, in conflict resolution and in the classroom, just all across the board. They're getting reinforcement of what we're teaching at home. One of the benefits of any private school is that if you move out of your neighborhood, but you're still within your city, you can still attend that school. So it's different from a public school that is based on your address, and there's some freedom in that. We chose a private school that does not make families sign a statement of faith saying that they are Christians. So our campus is not a Christian-only campus, and we appreciate that. We like the fact that our kids are exposed to people who don't believe the same way we do, but that they are under leadership that does reinforce our beliefs. The class sizes are smaller typically in a private school, and so the academics sometimes can progress at a faster pace, so that's a pro. I like that there's uniforms because there isn't that constant desire to show off, name brands and what you're wearing, so I like uniforms. A big difference that I was not expecting between public school and private school. In public school, when you're absent, they don't like it because they're not getting that tax money on the day that your child is not in the classroom. But at a private school, they don't really care. They're going to work with the family to make sure that the child catches up. But there isn't that, guilt and shame that you took your kid out of school. They definitely give families the freedom to go on vacations and off seasons, and that was not what I experienced at public school. So now the cons of private school. The most obvious con is going to be the cost. It costs way more than public school, which is free, and it costs more than homeschooling, even though you have to pay for your own curriculum. There's just a lot more cost for a private school. We're back in a classroom environment after experiencing homeschooling, and we're definitely feeling the change from homeschooling where there's no homework, homeschooling where there is a lot more freedom as far as how you spend your time and how quickly you progress through a subject. And so even though private school is essentially the same as public school in that regards, our family is feeling it this time because when we did it schooling the first time, it was all we knew. The school community is somewhat homogenous in compared to a public school education. So that's our series on how to choose a school, the pros and cons of public, the pros and cons of homeschooling, the pros and cons of private school. I think the thing that I've learned most from it is that even with the list of pros and cons, sometimes God's going to take your family in a place and in a direction that doesn't line up with logic, and that's okay. And it's okay to be open to going somewhere that doesn't necessarily make sense on paper, doesn't necessarily make sense to your friends and family, and sometimes doesn't even make sense to you. Another thing that I've definitely learned through the process is that no schooling is perfect, and no schooling is ideal, and there's going to be days, no matter which one you choose, where you're like, oh my word, this is the wrong choice, I can't believe we did this, we need to get out. And it's important to stick through it, and it's important to get the blessings from wherever God has you. And some of those blessings are harder to swallow than others. But even the trials that come through different schooling options can be really beneficial for your child and also for you as a parent. So good luck in choosing a schooling for your family and for your individual kids. If you have any suggestions for what next Mommy Minutes can be, put them in the comments. I'd love to look at them.
room gì nữa mấy bạn? Sau lại tốt nghiệp. Hello, hello, say hi, hai với Kiệt. Hello, hello, hello. Rồi Kim, hai ông bà. Rồi 23 tháng của Tí, nhân ông Phong, ông bà, chị Sáu. Rồi đây là tiệc sau tốt nghiệp của team. Rồi. Alright, everybody say hi. Michael, cô Thúy, how are you? Rolly, Thiện. This is nhân vật chính. Đinh Loan, Chrissy, Chuột. Hello, how are you doing? Đó, quay lại bàn đầu tiên. Rồi.
Do you think you got the best start in life? Did you end up in a school that might have resembled a zoo more than it felt like an institution of higher learning? Perhaps in the past, getting by without a lot of pieces of paper to defend your intelligence may have been harder, given that nowadays we can learn so much online and that many of the world's leading and richest entrepreneurs at university. Had they out of high school, that could have been a different matter, but many great minds have not been too keen on school. One of those minds was Albert Einstein, who famously said, "Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school." So does it matter where you go? That's what we'll find out today in this episode of our graphic show, Private School versus Public School. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell button so that you can be part of our notification squad. First of all, we should say that by public school we mean schools that are run by the government. This could be confusing for Brits, as when they say public school, they are not thinking of schools run by the public sector, but selective institutions that demand private payment. Basically, private school as Americans know it is public school in the UK. It's another case of tomato tomato. We'll base this show on the US today, as covering the globe's schools would be impossible, and some of the things we will discuss are relevant globally. You might be surprised to know that in the USA, according to the Council for American Private Education, there are 33,619 private schools in the United States. There are around 5.1 million students enrolled in these schools. Private schools are home to almost 10% of all school students in the US. The same sources state that there are 441,496 teachers working full-time in private schools. As much as 79% of these schools have a religious affiliation. The Washington Post reported in 2016 that these schools are virtually all white, with non-white students only making up around 10% of students across the country. As for public schools, according to the National Center for Educational Statistics, 50.7 million public school students will be studying in one of them from pre-kindergarten to grade 12 in fall 2017. Teaching all those kids will be 3.2 million full-time teachers, which is a ratio of 16 students for every teacher. The ratio in private school is 12 students for one teacher. One of the main differences of public school is the mixed ethnicity of students. Public schools in America are made up of 24.4 million white kids, 13.6 million Hispanic students, 8 million black students, 2.8 million Asian Pacific Islander students, 0.5 million American Indian Alaska Native students, and 1.5 million mixed-race students. What about costs? Well, the government pays for public schools. In 2017 to 2018, it's projected that the budget for public schools will be $623.5 billion. This means that each student will cost an average of $12,300. Taxes will pay for this. Private schools are a different matter, and they are funded by tuition fees. Tuition costs will change depending on the school. For the year 2017 to 2018, the national average for private school tuition is $9,975 per year, which is $8,918 per year for elementary schooling and $13,524 per year for high school. The state of Vermont had the highest average, with high school being $31,543 per year on average. If you are looking for cheap private schooling, head to West Virginia, where the average cost for high school is currently $5,262. We should add that a handful of private schools cost around the $50,000 a year mark. So what do you get for your money besides pretty gardens and obviously top-notch facilities at a private school, and perhaps metal detectors and patrolling policemen in some wayward public schools? Well, when it comes to the syllabi, public schools have to adhere to state standards while private schools have much more flexibility. This is seen as getting a better and more diverse education. The good news for not so wealthy people is that high school graduation rates in public schools has gone up recently. It reached its highest during the Obama administration in 2015 at 83.2% of students graduating. At the same time, 95% of private school students graduate. According to the website College Admission, just about all of those private school grads will attend a university, whereas only 49% of public school graduates will enter further education at college. If you want to get into an Ivy League university, there's no reason why you can't get in after attending public school. Top-tier admissions tells us that roughly 25% of successful applicants to those top universities came from private schools and 60 to 70% from public schools. The rest were homeschooled. Private school does work for a lot of people. The richest man in the world, Bill Gates, went to a private prep school, but then he later dropped out of Harvard. On the other hand, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg went to a public school. When researching for how private school graduates out-earn other kids in the future, most of the stories are about the UK and how private school there seems to create most of the UK's millionaires. The US playing field might be a bit more level. After all, Dr. Dre didn't go to private school. It seems in the US, if you actually get to university, it might not matter where you studied in high school in terms of making it. At the same time, studies have found that being born with a silver spoon usually means you'll be passing that spoon on, and poorer folks with degrees don't usually jump up a class. Your background makes all the difference. A college degree, says one report, is no great equalizer. Why is this? There are a host of possibilities, from family resources during childhood and the place where to the colleges that low-income students support. Then you have rich folks that dropped out of high school, such as the billionaire Tumblr founder David Karp, who dropped out of high school at 15 years old. Joining him as a high school dropout is Facebook's former product manager Mike Hudak and filmmaker Quentin Tarantino. In light of the last person, success in the arts or sport probably is not related to if you went to public or private school, but if you want social mobility, then it's probably better your parents paid the cash for your education. It also seems that the filmmaker is the only one of the three to have come from a humble background. You may have some unique skills or be a natural autodidact, and so school doesn't matter much even if you are poor. Nonetheless, we can't ignore some statistics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics states that people without a high school diploma will earn, on average, $25,636 per year if in full-time employment. 8% of high school dropouts are currently unemployed. If you have a high school diploma and nothing else, the average wage is $35,256 per year, with 5.4% of those people currently unemployed. If you have a bachelor's degree, you might earn an average of $59,124 per year. Only 2.8% of Americans with a bachelor's degree are unemployed, much less than the 4.4% of Americans currently out of a job. In conclusion, it's odds on that if you went to private school, then you most certainly went to university, and with some family wealth behind you, it's also pretty much a certainty you fell into one of those higher wage brackets. Then again, if you are brilliant or spend more time reading than scrolling, then it is likely nothing will hold you back. So, what do you think? Is private school worth the extra dough, or is it all just a bunch of hooey? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called Vegans vs. Meat Eaters. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time!